Welcome, and thank you for joining today's Insights webinar. My name is Matthew Stevens. I'm the Managing Director at eHotelier, and I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar, Bringing Order to Chaos. Over 2,000 industry professionals have registered for today's webinar, which we will be recording. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat box, and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible at the end of the webinar. COVID-19 has had a rapid and devastating impact on our industry, with many hotels closed, repurposed, or running at occupancies lower than we've ever seen before. It's natural to feel off balance as the world locks down. Today, we'll focus on rationalizing the chaos and on bringing calm, perspective, and actionable insights to managing through COVID-19. Today, I'm joined by two hospitality leaders with extensive experience managing and advising hotel organizations globally. Firstly, James Bishop, Senior Director, Global Demand Partnerships at SiteMinder. James transitioned from hotel management to technology solutions, and in his current role, James works with global partners integrated with the SiteMinder platform, driving reservation demand and enabling access to revenue-generating applications for hotels worldwide. My second guest is Frederic Toitot, Chair of the Revenue Optimisation Advisory Board for HSMAI Europe, Senior Hotel Management Lecturer specialising in revenue management and marketing at the Hotel Management School of Maastricht, and previously Vice President, Global Learning and Development for the Accor Group Worldwide Headquarters in Paris. Thank you again for joining today's Insights webinar, and now I'd like to hand over to James to begin the presentation.
Great, thanks, Matt. So Matt's just driving the slides, so I'm just going to ask him just to move down to the to where we're going to start. So basically, measuring hope in a period of uncertainty. So what we've done here at SiteMinder is we've had a look at the data that we see that comes through our own platform, and we're really looking to see, look, what is the current effect on each of these markets? And a lot of this is not going to be a surprise, certainly to the hoteliers and those of us, involved in the hospitality industry, all of us on this line, with a lot of the graphics that we see here, but also looking further into the future and trying to understand what markets and how they recover, and take some learnings and really try and share those with you guys today. So for the data that we're going to see over the next few slides, we've really tracked the data across various regions in Europe and the US between about the 19th to the 26th of March. So we're looking at here at the net reservations over the next 3 months, or April through to June. And as I said, look, it's not a great picture, but it's not one that anyone should be really surprised at. So many regions, the majority of hotels are closed. Those that are open mainly, be there supporting quarantine services or supporting, health experts in terms of having accommodation near where they're needed to be for key workers in the COVID-19 response. Outside of this, there is very little, if zero, travel across the industry. Having said this, there are new reservations coming into each region, but these are being far outweighed by the cancellations that we're seeing as an industry at the moment. So we're seeing a lot of last-minute reservation bookings through our channels. Not so many as we're seeing actually the longer reservations with a longer lead time. But we are still seeing reservations coming through. But what we're also seeing as a pattern is that guests are leaving their decision to cancel to the last minute as well. So there's a lot of hope from travelers that situation is changing. But as we see over the last week or so, that we're in this for a longer period than maybe we might have expected over sort of 2 to 3 weeks ago, those cancellations are obviously coming in sooner. So if I just, this particular graphic we're looking at is Europe, and it's based on UK, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Portugal, those main regions within Europe. These next few slides is just breaking down to the different nations. So obviously just really demonstrating that everyone's in the same boat here. So this one is Spain, where you can see very similar patterns over the next 3 months. And then obviously France, as expected. The UK, And I think the last one there we have was Germany. However, if we go to the next slide, could actually we be looking at something more positive later on in the year? So whilst the next 3 months is looking pretty dire from a cancellation perspective, if we look further ahead, we are seeing positive trends across many markets. So we've seen the average lead time for reservations made in the same period increase to about 90 days across Europe. Although there are some reservations being made sooner, it appears that some travelers are currently banking on a late summer in Europe this year. These numbers are not close to what we're used to seeing on the books, usually at this time of year, but what we're looking here for is not necessarily something groundbreaking, but looking for those positive trends. I think there's a lot of sentiment that travelers want to travel, need to travel, certainly from a leisure perspective and from a business perspective. But will September be a turnaround month for Europe? Potentially, but as we haven't reached that peak yet, treat the data with caution. We have to treat this data with a cautious optimism. While the net new reservations are in the right direction as of now, it really does depend on obviously what happens and within each of those regions. So depending on whether travel restrictions lift or guest confidence increases and travelers feel safe close to that period. This may change. Guests will take a wait and see approach at the moment. Well, if we have a look at this data again on the next slide, we've broken that down again between Spain, France, UK, and Germany. Now, what we can see the differences here is obviously one aspect is to this recovery is who will start traveling first. And it's widely anticipated that domestic travel will start the recovery due to international borders controlling the potential demand from other regions. I believe this is reflected in the data we see with Germany and UK, which typically sees about 85% of domestic travel in any one year. And as you see on these particular slides, that they're actually starting to see positive trends a month sooner than other regions. This is an opportunity for hotels as we witness recovery to adapt their product and marketing to attract more domestic travelers, rather than, as other markets, the usual international trade. Of course, all hotels need to understand their guests and their mix of business or leisure and use this to effectively market and adapt to those that are able to travel first. So if we just leap on to the next one, we're going to have a quick look at the USA. And so the US is a very similar sort of picture to what we're seeing across Europe over the next 3 months. The US is obviously a different market, and the trends we see here can vary depending on which state we look at. We haven't broken this down to each state. I've not actually gone that deep, but obviously hoteliers from each state will be aware of their own business. If it looks better than this for the next 3 months, then this is probably what is to come as and when those lockdowns appear in different parts of the world and different regions within each country. But if we look further ahead for the USA, again, we're seeing again those very similar positive trends coming in August, September, October. Of course, a lot of bookings are dependent on meetings, and that's not just specific to the US, but also across Europe as well. So it's very dependent on meetings, events, and conferences. So we've seen more optimism from the US and some in Europe with events that haven't been cancelled, but are actually rebooking for August, September, October. And again, the US, we've seen an increase in average lead time from, what we normally see from about 4 to 6 weeks, going out to 70 days plus, which is fairly unprecedented. So really at the moment, people are delaying travel, but they're not canceling it. So if we look at the next slide, so we're looking at signs of recovery, okay? So there's no doubt that people want to travel. Businesses need to get back to business. However, although there are green shoots in many markets where we can start to see reservations recover, This is, of course, reliant first on each region recovering from the COVID-19 situation. Some regions globally appear on a good course, and we've heard positive feedback from regions like Singapore, Hong Kong, and in fact, I was chatting to a partner this morning with regards to Taiwan as a region, which, according to the data, they have flattened out and peaked, and they actually started a bit more freedom of travel for their travelers across the region domestically. And by all accounts, the number of transactions that, in terms of reservations they received, was actually higher than anticipated in that sense. So, that's a positive sign from one region. What we need to do is see as other regions and regions that kind of look more similar to us, or the region where you're located, is understand and learn from those as they happen. But we can also look at past events like the global financial crisis and SARS, but the situation we're in at the moment is actually quite unprecedented to that. So this is big thanks to STR for the next two slides. They allow us to share some of their slides. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go on the STR webinars that they've been doing, they really do provide some great insights also into very specific markets and forecasts. But got to appreciate them doing that for our industry at this time, and obviously allowing us to use their slides at the same time. So, but this is market level occupancy during the SARS outbreak. And as you can see from the time from March, where I think that was the point where the World Health Organization declared this as a pandemic or emergency, and you saw that you can see the drop in occupancy across those markets, and that's a relatively sharp bounce back from May, June through to August, where the occupancy levels are back to or near as close to the level where they were prior to that event. Now, we can hope for a similar recovery in this crisis. However, it will be dependent on our own freedom to travel. So as said before, and I think we'll say it again, and it will be said in probably many webinars that you guys attend, domestic travel will bounce back sooner. However, obviously it'll take longer for international guests to return. If we just have a look at the following slide. So as we said, look, we can look at other regions, right? And understand their recovery and see how that would reflect on us. So of course, everyone's going to have a quick look at China, right? As the situation appears to be under control based on the reported numbers. However, this is a very different market to which we operate in Europe, in the US, and other parts of the world. Firstly, over 95% of China's business is domestic. Therefore, they don't have to rely on international travel in order to start seeing returning to the same level of occupancy as they were before. The next regions that were or are heavily affected in terms of the timeline that are, I guess, more similar to us would be Italy and Spain, right? So as these are regions, I'd say right now, appear to be nearing or at the top of their curve of infections, it's going to be really telling over the next few sort of 2 to 3 or 4 to 6 weeks how that data plays out, and when the lockdowns in those regions will be relaxed, and when people can start getting back to something that resembles business as usual. However, with this China data, as you can see, through 1 week, occupancy recovered from just below 20% up to 30%. So, to be honest, from the end of January, beginning of February, there really was nowhere else but up in that market. And I think that's going to be the same across most of the markets in Europe and the US at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Frederic, from an association perspective with your role at HSMAI, How do you see the industry at the moment? Do you have any comments on James's presentation and the slides there?
Well, good afternoon. First of all, no, I completely agree with everything that James said. We are really living into a very unstable and complex situation at the moment. A lot of hotels are closed. Others are partly closed. Some properties, the ones that are still open, are running on a very low occupancy. So it's very much depending on the local situation, and while we speak, it is still evolving. I was having a webinar last week with HSMAI, and the figures, the data, and what we were saying were slightly different. It was only 7 days ago. So it's really difficult for us, and especially when you work in an association, or when you want to give expertise or recommendations to the hoteliers, to have one golden rule or one piece of advice to follow. It's really something that we have to be cautious with. It seems to be a global crisis worldwide. We are dealing with health issues and not just finance. It's not a financial crisis, so for us it's really new. It impacts our customers, our colleagues in the hotels, institutions, and again, the intensity of all that is really different depending on the countries. So from an association point of view, it means that we have to really probably have adaptive messages, try to be on point on what we can provide to the hoteliers, starting with training, education, giving them all the recommendations that they need. First, to go through that storm, because that's where we are right now, in the middle of it. And secondly, to prepare the recovery, because at the end of the day, recovery is going to come. We have to be optimistic. There is no doubt it will come back. Now the question is when and at which pace. So it's really complex, but we are doing our best, all of us, to accompany and support the hoteliers, and HSMAI is doing that for a start.
Thank you, Frederic. So in terms of navigating through this crisis, is it possible for hotels to yield during this downturn?
Well, that's a good question, Matthew. I would say it's not really possible for hotels to yield, as we understand yielding in the term, the definition that we use usually, simply because there is not much to yield at the moment. I mean, yielding revenue when there is no revenue, you understand that it's not really what we do. So that being said, I always tell companies I'm working for, and all the students as well that are listening this afternoon, that at the end of the day, revenue management works well in booming periods, but also when things are not going so right, on low seasons or during downturns. So where we are right now, except that in your toolbox, the tools that you can be using in downturns are not so, there's not so many of them. So you have to be very picky, and you have to be precise in what you're doing. So it's a question of boosting your occupancy percentage. It's a question of filling your empty space, whether it is a room, it is a meeting room, a restaurant, or a spa, by maintaining your rates, of course, at an acceptable level. We'll come back to that. And by working on, as much as you can on discounted offers, on packaging, on opening up to external distribution channels, and being very reactive to the rare clients who are actually knocking at your door today. The problem that we have now in this crisis is that we are not dealing with your usual type of downturn. We have here to fight with a totally different type of crisis, for which the past downturns that James was showing, including the SARS, may not be of much help. Yes, it is useful, but we have to look at it maybe in a different angle. Why? Because there is a huge uncertainty factor in this crisis, and hotel managers, as well as revenue managers, who are forecasters by essence, do not like uncertainty. So what we have to do is really to work on short-term and medium-term planning, and that has to be very much data-driven, using any kind of system or online intelligence tool at your disposal, whether it is a revenue management system or a tool that will help you to check the what competition is doing and what are the trends on the market, etc. So you need as well to review very much your booking patterns. Watch for any segment shifts that you may have, because segments may be shifting right now, and any opportunity you could have to fill and sell your empty space. That's the thing. And last but not least, talking about the rates as well, because I know that pricing is a big issue. You have to resist dropping your price. Experience has shown that it's never a very good idea to drop the price, to go into a price war. I know it's easy to say from my chair versus when you are operating a hotel, but it's a question of surviving, and we know that it's not because you drop your price that your demand is suddenly going to grow and come at your hotel. So there are other ways of doing it, and we are probably going to see that with James right now. Try to give you some clues and recipes for trying to do the best out of this situation.
Thank you, Frederic. So, James, what should hoteliers be focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, it's another good question, because it's very difficult, and it does depend on the situation of each hotelier, whether they are experienced still having guests or travelers in their market or not. I mean, if we assume not, then their focus needs to be on where can I get revenue from, and where is it going to come from first in terms of that recovery. So a question on a lot of people's mind is, okay, so how can I plan for something if I don't know when it's going to happen? I think you have to be putting all your best practices in place now, and look at the indications and the trends. And as we say, like, the indication is that the recovery comes from domestic travelers. So is my product actually set up to attract a domestic traveler? When you think about, well, people like me or anyone else who's currently locked up in their house, the first thing that I want to do when I'm allowed is to get away for a good long weekend, a good break, take the family, see something else other than these four walls, and to start thinking about what creativity, what packages we can have for those. And as Frederic said, one of the key things is going to be data. You need to understand what guests you've had in your hotel previously, what segments of guests, and understand how you can market to those guys, and really try and give them what persona of travelers have you had in your hotel that you can effectively market to for recovery, and how do you attract more of the same type of person. And I think that's going to be key for hotels that are going to be successful coming out of that. Really keeping in touch with your loyal customers, those that have been with you over the last year or 2 years, and let them know what sort of packages and offers and availability you're going to have. Even consider selling people vouchers now for them to take after the event. So I think understanding your data and who's been and then who's more likely to come and travel first is going to be key. Some of the groups that you may well have had to shift out because you're closed, obviously maintaining relationships with those guys and understanding how you can get people to rebook their business that you're losing over these next 3 months is something that you should have plenty of time to spend on. One of the things I have seen for businesses now is I have seen examples of a few hotels where they've changed the operation of their kitchens and restaurants to doing deliveries. So for people that are stuck indoors, actually hotels are now providing food directly to the door through a contact-free delivery service, whether they're using one of the delivery services that are online now, or even implemented their own in a very short time.
Great, thank you. And Frederic, what's the role of the revenue manager at the moment?
Well, that's a question that we may ask ourselves. Well, that's a very important role still, but maybe not the role that we are used to have with revenue managers. Revenue managers are, most of, when everything is going all right, they are forecasters. They are trying to predict the future, and they're working with data that is coming to them in big numbers, and they manage to work with our systems and to give sound recommendations to the senior management. Now it's really difficult because, as we said earlier, the data that we have is scarce and incomplete and unstable, and we don't know exactly if that will hold, and if the on-the-book situation that we have today will not become cancellations tomorrow. So it's really tricky. So from my perspective, we should use revenue managers as being like super analysts, providing data intelligence, as James said, to owners, general managers, and anyone who is in a position to decide for the hotels or for the group of hotels. I like to make the analogy to the airline operations. And when you're flying over the Atlantic and things are running as normal, there may be a few bumps en route, but basically your aircraft system is in control, right? And the captain can rely on the system. But in case of a very serious situation, a situation that is unpredictable, that is really unknown to the machine, the captain must go manual and take back directly the control of the aircraft. So this is a bit where we are right now. So it's a bit the same for revenue managers with their revenue management systems and machines. Yes, they are still very much helpful, but the on-the-book and forecast data has become, for the time being, mostly unreliable and or incomplete. And revenue managers have to go manual and use what human beings are very good at. And what are we good at? When I tell everyone why revenue managers will not disappear tomorrow versus a machine, it's because we have some common sense, because we have our intuition, because we have some experience of previous events that happen on that, because we have our knowledge and certainties about how customers and governments and people will react in such an unstable situation. So we have to use that when we are in a hotel now. I'm not saying that you should not use your data. As James said, data is so important at the moment, so you have to be data focused. It's a question of just sorting out which data is going to give you the best insights right now for the current situation and for the recovery. So you have to use your data intelligence tools and revenue management systems to watch any sign of recovery, to watch as well the competition, what competition is doing. Maybe you don't know everything about the trends. I mean, look at the figures right now for the USA and North America. 10 days ago, we were not talking about that. Today, it's like incredible what's happening there, right? So it means that you have to watch your systems and your data every second or every minute as a revenue manager to be able to be really up to date on what's happening outside your hotel. So for me, it's a kind of radio recovery, if I can put that like this, that every single revenue manager in the world should subscribe to and register to be always tuned into what's happening outside. So you need as well to make sure that your leaders are educated and are informed and are trained about what's happening and what are your decisions and your recommendations, because you cannot afford in this very tricky situation to have people in your organizations having a different agenda. Alignment, consistency is key here. and you have to really nurture that. You have to be, as a revenue manager, you are at the front line for being the kind of chief recovery officer, something like this, right? Even if the recovery window keeps shifting, further along the line, and as James said, it's pushing back, and we don't know when the recovery will be, you have to be ready for it. So you have to work on your strategies, whether it is a pricing strategy, a marketing strategy, distribution strategies. You have to keep an eye on your rates. You need to avoid all those price wars that we were talking about earlier, because you need to save your profits as much as possible and your cash flow as well, because it's okay to rebound, but you cannot rebound from nowhere. You have to survive. So it's a question as well of keeping afloat, right? And you need to look as a revenue manager together with the other teams in the hotels. And at HSMAI, we had this nice convention about breaking the silos between commercial, marketing, revenue. And you know what? It's time for that now, really, because we all work in that crisis together, and we have to together to look at the opportunities to attract those new types of customers that may be knocking at our door now. We'll come back to that for the recovery, but probably your local clients. There is this new staycation trend coming up now around us, where you have local people coming to your hotel for a weekend or for a short stay. You can rent your space to remote workers, people who cannot go back to the company and still need a space for working. It could be, all that. So there are a lot of creativity and opportunities for you to build on. And for me, it's very important that revenue managers, expand their scope and their vision beyond the traditional hotel borders, and base their analysis on the total volume of accommodation on the market too. Let's not forget that Airbnb and all those alternate accommodations are right there too. So there's a huge volume of accommodations free on the market now. And for the revenue managers, it's something that he or she has to take into account. As James said, you have to work on your contracts, maybe with local actors, companies, for instance, that would like to stay with you. And you have to be ready, and that will be my conclusion for that question, you have to be ready for welcoming back all these customers that are going to come back. It's sure, whether they are coming for business or leisure, they will come back, but you should not get, let's say, surprised. Make yourself surprised with a recovery that you are not expecting, because that could be faster than we think. And the worst that a hotel could do is just be passive and wait for things to happen. You need to be ready for recovery.
So, James, in terms of building the foundations for recovery, then what do hoteliers need to think about and prepare for recovery?
Yeah, again, it's a tough one, of course, because I'm sure they're thinking about very little else. But as Frederic pointed out too, and we might have mentioned before, you can only rely on, you have to really dig deep into the data, understanding your guests, your markets, and where you can be strongest. And that data resides in your PMS, that resides in a CRM system. If you're looking at forward-looking data, if you're using a revenue management system, to really try and build a picture of where your lowest hanging fruit is going to be, who are you likely to be able to market to most effectively in that return, and to start being creative, because it's the simplest basis of economics is supply and demand, right? You guys as hoteliers are the supply, but how can we drive the demand? And we obviously, I think your channel partners, OTAs and wholesalers will play a big part in that. They've always been there to drive direct, or sorry, drive reservations directly to hotels. But it's also an opportunity for you to really, push that direct channel at the same time. And, at this point, you can be communicating to those guests and making sure you're really building awareness of, your direct channel and the strengths of that and the opportunities that you can provide through that channel. I think that's a really key thing to do. But don't ignore that third party, because obviously we know that a lot of the demand is going to be driven through there as and when it comes back. It's a really good time to make sure you've got a great rate strategy across all of those, that you have parity in that. So if I'm offering a flexible rate over here, I want to make sure I'm offering a flexible rate across all of my channels. Guests are not now looking to book non-refundable. You might as well, in my opinion, you can remove them. But if you don't remove them, make sure you definitely have flexible rates available. People can see the risk in planning ahead, and they don't want to be taking that on the chin. Now, obviously, hoteliers over the last few weeks have been, hit quite a lot with cancellations and potentially even paying back some of those non-refundables, which isn't necessarily under their belt. It's something we have to take on the chin. We want to make sure that those guests are in a position to book with us and do everything we can to make sure that we make it as easy as possible. It's a good time to look at your distribution strategy overall and understand, look, are there partners that I'm not working with that I could be? All of these times I've had the excuse, I don't have time to build to go and contract with that particular channel, and I don't have the time to do this. So to be honest, we have no guests at the moment. Now is actually a really good time to kind of draw a line under that and say, look, I've increased my distribution channel. I want to work out how I can do more from business from China, or business from, when that market starts coming back, or from Southeast Asia, or if you don't get a huge amount of business from certain areas, this is the time to have a look at how you can increase your visibility across those markets. If you've never played in Meta, I think this is now a very good time to make sure that you're working with a partner that can get you visibility on Google, because when demand comes back, surprise, surprise, Google sees it first. And at the moment, nobody in terms of the larger OTAs are putting any marketing dollars into promoting your property. The only visibility outside of organic that's being seen on Google is through the Google Hotel Finder or Meta search. So it's actually, although the transactions are going to be very low at this time in terms of visibility, it certainly is going to make sure you're there when those transactions come back. So that's your rate plans. Obviously, make sure your content's good across all of those channels. I mentioned that, but your content score, it goes a long way to how am I going to rank across each of those channels, and you'll want to make sure that you're getting a really high position on across those channels by managing your reviews, managing your content, updating your images, making sure you're listing all of your amenities. Work with those key channel partners and make sure that you're well positioned at that time. And yeah, it's a good time to evaluate your tech stack. Are there tools that other hotels are using that you're not making advantage of? So, when we start getting guests back, we want to get all the revenue we can for each guest that we got through the door. What does your upsell strategy look like? What does your F&B offering look like? Does it fit with the type of guests that we're going to get in? Or actually, is this time to say, you know what, there's no food in the freezer, let's relook at that menu, right? And let's make sure we got a really compelling offer for when those guests are coming back through the door. Do we need to do the same level of housekeeping or more or less than we were doing before? There's a whole opportunity to discover and adapt to what that market may look like in 3 to 6 months' time.
Thank you, James. So, Frederic, when are the signs of an upturn, and what should we be targeting?
Well, upturn. That's the question is when and how and which intensity. So there is a big let's say risk or chance that the upturn will be slow. The upturn can be even a bit erratic, with ups and downs, and we think that it's back on track, and then it's falling again a little bit, because I mean I don't have a crystal ball, but we can imagine that again this is going to be not an easy recovery, and probably not a linear kind of curve where things are going to be back as if it was just a problem of finance or economy. So my belief is that, and it's shared with a lot of people across the hospitality sector now, is that growth will probably start with our domestic markets, right? And most likely, the more leisure-driven people will start coming back to your hotels. That's my belief. Because people, even if they don't travel long distances to start with, they will want to really get out. Okay, we are all being locked down at the moment in a lot of countries around the world, and I can bet that most of us we will want to get out, enjoy a weekend, some time off, away from the apartment where you've been stuck for the past 4 weeks with your kids and mother-in-law or whatever. Okay, so it's really a question of opening, getting ready for that local market, especially on leisure. And of course, when you say that, then you have to think about what do those customers want, including us. What do we want when we go for a weekend somewhere close to our home? So I guess you want to have, tranquility. You want to go to nature. You want to have a nice restaurant. You want to have a swimming pool. You want to have a space where you can really enjoy what you've been missing for the past weeks. So it means that for hotels, it's going to be a question of focusing on all those ancillary revenues, such as restaurants, spas, leisure activities, etc. With regards to corporate travel, because that's the other side of our business, a very important one, meetings, events, and so on, I believe that they will be slower to recover, because not only we can anticipate some budget cuts from the companies in the travel, programs, but more importantly, people evolve, including ourselves. Look at us in this meeting. We are, 700 together right now. We get used to have meetings and conferences online and so on. So I'm not here trying to be over pessimistic, but I'm saying that we are evolving. We are building some new habits, and I'm pretty sure that we are going to get used of organizing meetings and signing contracts and getting informed and trained from a distance. So it means that for the corporate segments, we may see the upturn a bit farther down the road. Companies usually they think different than individuals, right? Home working, remote collaboration, like we're doing today, is becoming a real alternative, basically, to going to hotels and having a conference in a hotel. So what will make the success of a hotel or of a hotel group in the near future, when the upturn is coming, is how they're going to use in a creative way. Please note that James and I, we've been using that word now, creativity, a few times, because for me, it's one of the golden rules that we have to keep from this webinar. Remember that revenue management systems and forecasting machines are not creative. They are, applying algorithms. So it's up to us to make the difference. And maybe we should focus less on rates and more on packages, on, special special offers for local demand. James was saying that a little bit. We need to adapt our website. Your marketing strategy must be there to boost inspiration, dream, make people dream about your offering, and you know, they need to go back to your hotel because they want it absolutely. So we all have unique selling points in our hotels, in our properties. Maybe it's the time maybe to tweak them a little bit, and to try to reinforce or adapt your USPs according to your location and according to your market and according to that new demand that you may have tomorrow, with a different state of mind for them. So you need to work on your destination. You need to offer inspirational travel to your customers. For instance, if you are running a hotel in a secondary town, close to a major city, for example, like let's say 50 kilometers south of Paris, you are in the nature. You're not too far from the actual home of your customers, but you can really sell the fact that you are in the middle of nowhere, you know, in a quiet zone, in the middle of a forest, and you can, you know, gather your friends and families in a safe way. That is possible tomorrow. I strongly believe in that. But for that, of course, you need to have, as James was saying, your website, your distribution channels, and all your marketing strategies up and running. And this is where hoteliers have to act today to prepare that future that, according to me, is not going to be so far away, because people need to get out of the apartments now. It's becoming serious, and the best proof that we have, I received this morning a letter from you know, the governing body of my region saying that all the holiday places were closed officially because people were actually trying to run out of Paris right now, some people, to go and stay in those hotels close to Paris. So it shows that the demand is there. It's just a question that when the gates are going to reopen, we are ready to welcome those new types of customers.
Mm. Thank you, Frederic. So what lessons are we learning now to prepare for recovery and for potential future crisis, James?
Yeah, and look, I'll keep this fairly short because I want to leave some time for some of the questions that I've seen are coming in. But look, what we're learning about now is crisis management. I don't think anybody had written down what do you do in this situation. I know even for SiteMinder as a business, we didn't. We learned very quickly how to you know, get everyone. Well, we've got very much a culture of working together in our offices, and we very quickly took a good number of people and made it all remote across multiple offices in different locations around the world. And you know, this is a time for hoteliers to understand, well, okay, look, let's hope this never happens again. But if I ever get something that looks quite like this in my market, where's my playbook that I can pull out and say, these are the things that I should have done better, and to really document that sort of stuff. Like setting up key people to be able to work from home. Do you have everything technology-wise? Am I cloud-based? Like, can they do at home what they can do in the office from a revenue management perspective, from a marketing perspective? And you know, how did we manage our cancellations and modifications? Could we have done it better? Could we have had a voucher system in place where we're offering people to rebook on a voucher at a later date, which maybe we didn't think of at the beginning and we didn't make the most of? So I think it's really about, you know, when you come out of a crisis, to go back to your crisis playbook and make sure that you've ticked all those boxes and that you're going to be in a good position. Not for this to happen again. Let's say, fingers crossed, it never happens again, but anything that looks like this.
Okay, I think we're going to have to move on to some questions now. As you mentioned, we're running short of time, but we've got a few questions from those listening in on the call. One to James. I know, James, you're involved in the short-term rental market as well. There's a question here. What's your opinion on the recovery of short-term rental, and will it be similar to hotels? Will they still be around, and will they still be competing, or how will it differ?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, as a business, we haven't got a focus on the short-term rental. I mean, we have some relationship with partners that do, but you know, it's quite often because they're looking to get into the hotel business rather than us looking to get deep into short-term rental. But what I can say is that a lot of the providers, obviously, it depends who you are. Like if you're someone who's basically said, look, I've got these 4 or 5 apartments and this is going to be my job now, and I'm making a living, and there's some pretty shocking examples of people who suddenly thought, well, hang on, my retirement plan has just gone to pot because I've just lost an entire summer on the short-term rental. But I don't see why it would come back any differently to the hotel business. It's all accommodation that we talk about. There may be for some guests more of an attraction to be more secluded, which is some of the feedback I've had certainly in the short term. And Airbnb put some numbers out recently that they've seen an 80% increase in long-term stay, which is like stays up to 14 nights or 14 nights and beyond in the interim, where people are looking just to get away from the city and self-isolate elsewhere. Now, in some regions, that's perfectly acceptable. In some, like the UK, that's not advised, but that's certainly been happening in the short term. I would certainly see the same at the other end in terms of the recovery piece, where people are maybe also looking to have to be able to get into a completely different house with their family, maybe with the extended family that they haven't seen for a long time, and to enjoy that time together.
Okay. Frederic, we've got another question here. Hotels that supply rooms to key workers, such as or repurposed to health workers and the homeless, do you think the public will be fearful of using those hotels as accommodation in the future? And I guess this comes back to a point that you mentioned before about looking after your guests currently and maintaining your positive CSR position as well. So how do you think those hotels that are repurposed are going to fare in the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm very glad to be still working for Accor, the group, the international group that you all know. I know that there are many businesses and hotel groups that are doing this kind of actions, and for me, it's really a win-win situation where, at the end of the day, we are running hotels that are open all year long. They are empty at the moment or closed. And at the same time, next door, you have distressed people, health workers, people who are homeless, or people who can be sick today and do not have a bed in the hospital, etc. So merging those two worlds and opening our gates to some extent to the community is great. It's great for not especially for your revenue, because I don't think that you're gonna get most out of that, but it's really great for working with your community and making sure that the hotels play the role in not only in their business, but as well in their city as any citizen. And what we want as well is to make our staff, because we have not talked for the past hour about the teams and the staff and all the people who are working in the hotels right now, for the ones who are not closed and for the ones working from home for the hotels as well. It's very important that we keep those people highly motivated for working with us. We know already that's not easy to keep and to recruit the right profiles in the hospitality world for many reasons. So we should not forget that when recovery is going to be there, we will need those highly qualified employees and managers into our properties. And having them taking care of hotels in those difficult situations can be really stressful, but at the same time, welcoming health workers and opening the gates to the community they can be really proud of that. And for me, it makes a real difference because not only it's good for the brands, but it's good for the staff. It's good, of course, for the people that we are welcoming into our properties. So at the end of the day, it's really a win-win-win situation that we should nurture and develop in the coming weeks. I know that's what exactly Sébastien Bazin, the CEO of Accor, has expressed in the French media in the past days, and that's highly important for our industry. So for the staff and how as well how clients, customers are going to look at us, not only as a building with bedrooms, but a company with a big heart.
Thank you. And a final question to James. You mentioned before about domestic being the first to come back. But in terms of business travel, with more companies finding solutions for working from home, such as teleconferencing and webinars, do you think that's going to affect business travel? And if it's working well for them now, do you think it's going to extend into the future? I guess, will it affect business travel in the future?
I guess it depends on how it affects business first. And to be honest, I don't really follow that argument. I do believe that business travel will come back. I think I get so much more done in a face-to-face environment than you would in this. Like, I can't wait to get back to the office, and it's exactly the same. Like, I can't wait to be traveling and getting a meeting directly with our partners, and I find that time very much more productive. That's just me. Like, I'm not gonna just me traveling, believe it or not, doesn't fix the problem, but I do believe that that's the same, and certainly from other people I've spoken to, other people, things I'm reading, there's a similar. It might take longer for people to get back to that realization. I think a lot of people will say, do you know what, let's try more of this Zoom stuff and teleconferencing. But the need for travel is always going to be there, certainly within business.
Great.
This isn't going to stop it now.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got some links which we'll send out to all attendees to more resources on COVID-19 from SiteMinder, also through the eHotelier website and HSMAI Global and HSMAI Europe. So unfortunately we're out of time, but thank you very much to everyone who attended. As a result of today's webinar, we hope you've gained perspective on the current state of the industry, insights into how to navigate the current impacts, and also a focus to assist in preparing and maximizing opportunities for recovery. As I mentioned, we've been recording today's webinar, and you'll receive an email with a link to the recording for future reference. So thank you again, once again, for attending. We wish you a productive week and look forward to welcoming you back to an eHotelier Insights webinar again soon. I should also mention that SiteMinder are having some local webinars focusing on COVID-19 tactics too. So these links, if you go to the SiteMinder.com website, you can join those webinars as well. So thank you very much to SiteMinder, to James, and also to HSMAI Europe and to Frederic. Thank you very much for spending the time today with us, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt, for having us along.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.